Trauma is a big deal. It massively influences the way that we approach life. Everyone has it. And most people have these exiled parts in the shadows, and they're not aware that there are shadows for exiled parts to exist in, let alone have awareness over what the exiled parts are and how is that limiting their life. So, in other words, or moving forward, just to bring this loop home, we need to, in a lot of cases, to get into and start working with this trauma, we need to create enough safety in our system that our whole nervous system and psychology trusts us that we can hold those scary feelings that our exiled parts didn't get to feel right now in this moment in this body. And so when people say, I'm not scared, safe, I'm going to laugh about safety. Why would I feel unsafe? If that person had emotion come up in a situation, there is very little chance, if they're just a normal member of society, that they would have the capacity to hold themselves in a situation for the emotion to come up around other people or even by themselves. And the way that we can view emotional suppression is when any addictive tendency comes in, it's to suppress emotion. If you're addicted to sugar, sweets, your body's dysregulated. It's afraid that within that dysregulation, some of these exiled parts might arise, and you'll use some form of addictive tendency, whether it's cleaning, working, busyness, emotional eating, scrolling, whatever it is, to stuff down, shift the sensory experience. You eat the sugar, boom, big dramatic influence on your state, shifts and distracts away from the emotion. That's why people binge eat. That's why in extreme forms, people do drugs. And then they need to take more and more and more because their body adapts, and no longer is that suppression technique working. The emotions still coming to the surface. And when it all fails and people become too adept to whatever the addictive strategies are, people will literally end their life in a lot of cases before they sit in the emotional pain that's underneath those addictions, that's attached to those exiled parts. Now, that's a little snapshot into what's happening here. We have all these fragmented parts that's just like, so you can just imagine them like the photo of the exact scenario of when you experienced a traumatic memory. Just take a photo of that memory, and then that becomes a living part of you that's just been separated from the whole and stored deeply in your psyche. And then you will unconsciously limit the way that you live life and have unsafety activated. It'll impact your capacity to regulate your nervous system and live life feeling comfortably and confidently safe. Sounds, again, it can sound silly, but to be safe is the precursor to your prefrontal cortex being online. If you're feeling unsafe, your amygdala is online, your prefrontal cortex shuts down. Your clarity, strategic thinking, your imagination, your intelligence, all these things shut off when the amygdala is kind of being flared up, even if it's subtly. And so if you've got these underlying exiled parts that are hypervigilantly attempting to avoid being recreating scenarios, and they're just bubbling deep under the psyche, under the surface, then any little experiences as you go through your day, as you go through your life, will set off, boom, boom, set off the threat response, put you into dysregulation, activate stress and anxiety on even if it's a thin film. And your body is creating toxicity because there will be adrenaline and cortisol that's getting released from your sympathetic nervous system to try to tell you there's a threat, and that is toxic. If it happens too much and it's steady, you're constantly having to then do short-term gratification addictive tendencies to continue to stuff down this emotion that's wanting to come to the surface and to be remembered, to be brought back in and integrated into who we are so we feel more whole and it's not taking up bandwidth. If it's just sitting below the surface and we keep stuffing it down, that is taxing for our system. So how do we heal it? Well, there's this idea we have to feel it to heal it. Now, again, if you haven't listened to, seriously, pause this podcast and save this other episode, Advanced Emotional Healing, and listen to that to get a complementary perspective on the thoroughness of healing and the journey of creating safety